Hi, welcome to this month's DIY Crafternoon. And this month we are making DIY woven bookmarks. And I have, here it is. I have one that I am almost finished with. I'm almost finished with this one. But I will be demonstrating the whole bookmark for you today. It is quite a process. So we're going to try and edit this down so it's not too big of a video for you to watch. But it was a little bit tricky. I had to kind of start over a couple of times on a couple different parts. So we'll get started. If you picked up a kit at the library, you would have the directions. You're going to have a piece of cardboard, and you're going to have 3 colors of yarn. You're going to have white, and then you're going to have either gray or black sparkly, and then you're either going to have a yellow or a teal. I'm using pink today because I'm going to make this bookmark for my daughter, and she requested pink. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to need to grab a ruler and a scissors from your house and a pen. Oh, and in your kit, you're also going to have the most important thing as well, besides the yarn, is the weaving needle. So grab a ruler and grab a scissors, and you're going to take your cardboard and you're going to measure out 10 inches long by 5 inches wide, and you're going to cut it. Once you've cut it to 10 by 5, you're then going to take your ruler, and on each end you're going to mark off a 1/2 centimeter. Every 1/2 centimeter you're going to mark off. Unless your pen doesn't want to work. There we go. And I did it all the way across. You aren't going to use all of these for your loom because our bookmark is only going to be a thin strip, but it's just easier to measure them, and then you're going to cut little slits where you made those 1/2 centimeter marks on your cardboard. And so what we're making right here is the loom for our bookmark that we are going to weave. Now that we have our loom, so you did that on both ends. You did your 1/2 centimeter measurements and slits on both ends of your cardboard. This is our loom, and now we are going to warp it, as they say. So we're going to take either that gray or the black, depending on what you got in your kit, and we are going to wrap it around to make our warp our warp threads. So I just started in the middle. For me, that was easiest. And you're going to take your yarn, and you're going to tuck it into one of the slits at the top of the loom, like so. Okay. And then you are going to wrap it around the back of your loom down to the bottom slit, directly across. Directly across. Okay. Then you're going to take it and go to the next slit to the right and wrap it on the top here. Go back down, do the one directly down from it. Go to the right of the last one and keep wrapping until you have 8 threads on your loom. Whoop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 here. Oops, but I goofed. This happened a lot for me. This one I just missed one. I missed my strip here. It's tricky. You got to make sure that you're not missing one of the slits. I went one too far over. There we go. One more. Okay. So there we go. I have my 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These guys are a little close together, but that's all right. That'll be okay if they're not perfect. So once you have your 8 warp threads, you're going to cut that off. And now we have our loom warped. Okay. So now we are going to continue with that black or gray thread that you have. We're going to thread our weaving needle, which is very easy to thread, much easier than a regular needle because the eye is so huge. So we're going to take a fairly decent piece of that gray yarn. I would say maybe a couple feet, few. Okay. And we're going to do our first weave. And our first weave is very simple. You're just going to weave in and out and in and out. And we're going to do 5 rows. So we're going to start about, I don't know, maybe that's 1/5 of the way up on your loom. And we are going to weave it through. So we're going to start, we're starting over and then going under, over, under, over, under, over, under. See that? Okay. And we're pulling it through. And you're going to leave, I would say, a few inches at the end here. Okay. Now we're going to make our next row by going over, under, over, under. So the opposite of that row we just did. Okay. And pulling it through. You want it to be tight, and then you can always use your fingers to push them together, okay? And you can also push them tighter together when you get the rows finished. So we're going to continue doing that, doing every other one. So now we're on our 3rd row. We're going to start over, under, over, under, over, under. Oh boy, sometimes it's a little tough there. Whoop. Over, under. Pull it through. And tighten it. Sometimes you have to pull one. There we go, roll a little tight. Okay. So you always want to do the opposite from the row you just finished. So if you started with over and you ended up with under, when you turn around and go back, you're going to start with over and end on under. Hopefully that makes sense. So I ended up on under on this 3rd row. So I'm going to start over on my 4th row right above it. So start with over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Okay, and I just kind of use my needle to push it together. So that's my 4th row. This is going to be my last row of this. particular section of weaving. And I start over. Whoop. Okay. You just have to be careful to not weave the ending into the other sections too. Okay, so now I have them nice and tight. That's my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th row. There we go. Okay, and now we are done with this part and we are going to cut it off again, leaving about 2 to 3 inches of yarn. Okay, now we're going to start with our color. So if you have teal or if you have a mustard color, I'm using pink, like I said. So this is where we're going to start on our triangle sections of the bookmark. So as you can see in mine that I started, how there's angled sections here in the bookmark. This was my trial one and I goofed it up a little bit. So we're going to work on this. I did figure out my whoopsies. So this one will turn out right. So this is the part that we're going to be working on now. It's going to use that same over under stitch or weave, but we are going to, it's a little more challenging to get that angle. So again, you're going to weave, or you're going to thread your weaving needle. And you know, it's up to you if you want to cut your yarn short. For each angle, we're going to be doing 3 triangles, and you can change your thread each time. You can start a new weave each time, or you can just continuously do them. I am actually going to cut mine a little bit shorter, and then if I need to, I'll start a new one. Because it's hard to keep a long piece of yarn and weave it through. I tried to do that and it kept getting knotted, so it was kind of a pain. So I'm going to make it a little bit shorter, and this might be enough for my bookmark, but it might not be. So if I get to my get to a point and I need to start a new thread, that will be fine, and I'll show you guys how to do that. So here's what I found a little tricky, was beginning it. I don't know why I found it so hard, but I did. Okay, so we are going to start with just wrapping our yarn around the first strand. So pull it all the way through. And again, you're going to leave that 2 to 3 inch little section at the beginning here, like we did with the gray. So then you're just going to wrap it around, basically. So you go under and over, under again. Over again. So you have 2 rows of 1 weave. You're basically just wrapping that first warp thread twice. Okay, like such. Okay, now we're going to move on. We're going to go back. We're going to go back. We're going to go back under. On our next line of weaving. And go under, okay? And then we're going to go over the second thread, but then immediately go back. So we're going over the second thread, and then we're immediately going back under and then over that first thread. And that's going to create our second, excuse me, our third line, but it's now moving up to 2 weaves. Okay, so then we're going under again, and we're going to do that 2 again. So under the first warp thread, okay, Okay, and over that second one, but immediately going under and above. Okay, so you can see how it looks, how we're going to create our triangle. Okay, so now we're going to move on to 3. So we need to go over, we're going over that first warp thread, now we're going back under, we're going over the second thread, and then under the third thread, pulling it through. Okay, now we're under that third thread. Now we're going to go back over it, under it. We're going to go back over it above, under that second thread, over the first. Okay. Now we have our line of 3. Now we're going to do another line of 3. So we are going to go under that first thread, over that second thread, under the third thread. Pull it through. It's good to squish them down when you can so that we can see better how you're doing. Okay? Now we're going to go above. We're going to go over, under, over. Okay. Now we're going to start and we're going to do 4. So we're going to go to our 4th warp thread. Okay. So we need to go under our first, over our second, under our third, and over our 4th. Okay. So we're over our 4th, but now we need to go back. So we're going to go above it, go under our 4th, over our 3rd, under our 2nd, over our 1st. Okay. Now we're going to make one more line of 4. So we ended on over, so we need to go under our 1st, over our 2nd, under our 3rd, over our 4th. Okay. Now we're going to go back under our 4th, over our 3rd, under our 2nd, and over our 1st. Now we're going to go to our 5th warp thread. We ended our last one we ended it on top of the 1st warp thread, so we're going under that 1st warp thread, over the 2nd, under the 3rd, over the 4th, and under the 5th. Okay. And now we have to go back. So we're going over the 5th, under the 4th, over the 3rd, under the 2nd, over the 1st. Okay. And again, we're going to go to our 5th warp thread a second time. We ended on above, so we're going to go under the 1st, over the 2nd, under the 3rd, over the 4th, and under the 5th. I like to keep it nice and pushed down so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, we're going to turn back around. We're going to go over the 5th, under the fourth, over the third, under the second, over the first. Getting there, guys, we're getting there. Okay, now we're gonna head out to our 6th warp loom. And we ended on the above, so we're going to go under the first, over the second, under the third, over the fourth, under the fifth, and over the sixth. Okay, so make sure when you're ending on the over, see, I didn't go anywhere else, so it's over on the sixth, okay? So then what I'm going to do is on my way back, we're going to go back under the sixth. And that makes that circle. Under the sixth, over the fifth, under the fourth, over the third, under the second, and over the first. We got to go back to that 6th warp thread. So we ended above. We're going to go under the first, over the second, under the third, over the fourth, under the fifth, and over the sixth again. Cool. And then we're heading back. So we need to go under the 6th, over the 5th, under the 4th, over the 3rd, under the 2nd, and over the 1st. Pushing it down as you go. All right, and this is the final one. Oh, actually, that is the final one. We only go to the 5th warp loom. We leave 2 empty. So now we're going to start our 2nd triangle, okay? And this is just like the bottom. We're going to do it exactly the same as we did down here. So we're going to start all over again. So we're going to wrap the first warp thread twice. So it's going over. We're going to need to go under the first warp thread. Pull it through, okay? And now we're going to make our 2 lines of 1. So we just go under again. Okay, and under and over again. So see, we now have our 2 lines of 1. We're going to go back around and we're going to start on our line 2. So we are going under and then over 2, okay? I found this part a little tricky because gotta kind of transition again. So then we have to turn around and go under 2 and go over 1. And that's going to make our row of 2. Okay. It's also a little hard to tell if you're doing it right too. So then go back. So you ended up over on your first warp thread, so you're going to go under it and then over warp thread number 2 again. Okay, turn around and go under warp thread 2, over warp thread 1. And there you go. You've got your line of 1, your double line of 1, and a double line of 2. You're going to start going on 3, 4, and 5, and 6. So you're just going to repeat the steps we just did 2 more times. So you're going to make another triangle here, and then another triangle here. I'll come back to you guys when you're done, and we're going to start working on, we're going to put the top on, and then we'll start working on filling in with the white. Okay, so you should have finished your 3 triangles or 3 angles. And now we're going to put the top on before we start our white angles. Okay, so you're going to take that black or silver or gray, it's got some silver in there, gray thread, and you're going to go directly above your last angle, and you're going to do the rows again like we did on the bottom. So I'm going to do another 5. I like mine to be asymmetrical or symmetrical, not asymmetrical, symmetrical. So we're going to start over on our first warp thread, under second, over third, under fourth, over fifth, under sixth, over seventh, and under eighth. And we're going to pull it through. And you're going to leave that, again, that 2 to 3 inch little tail. Okay, now we're going to turn around and go above. So we ended on under, we're going to start on over the 8th, under the 7th, over the 6th, under the 5th, over the 4th, under the 3rd, over the 2nd, and under the 1st. Okay, now we're going to turn around and go over the 1st, under the 2nd, over the 3rd, under the 4th, over the 5th, under the 6th, over the 7th, and under the 8th. Make sure not to get your little tail in there. And now we're going to go back over the 8th, under the 7th, over the 6th, under the 5th, over the 4th, under the 3rd, over the 2nd, and under the 1st. Okay. I'm going to go back one more time. We're going to go over the 1st, under the 2nd, over the 3rd, under the 4th, over the 5th, oh boy, over the 5th, under the 6th, over the 7th, and under the 8th. Okay, and then you have your top. Make sure everything's pushed down nice and tight, and you can cut that off, leaving a little tail. Okay, and now for the last part of our weaving, we are going to use that white thread. So we're going to take our white thread and we're going to thread our weaving needle. And we're going to fill in this area here. Okay, so we're kind of going to go the opposite of what we did with these angles. But we're going to incorporate and use the same method. So we're going to start here at the bottom on this side, and we're going to start over. So we're going to go over the 8th, under the 7th, over the 5th, or I'm sorry, over the 6th, under the 5th, over the 4th, and under the 3rd. We're going to pull it through. Again, leaving our little tail. Okay. Now, we have to go back. So we're going to go over the 3rd, under the 4th, over the 5th, under the 6th, over the 7th, and under the 8th. So basically what you're going to be doing with the white is filling it in. And you're going to be doing the 2 rows again. So I'm going to go back and do this again and go to the 3rd warp loom, okay? So we're filling in this part and we're using that same under over weave. So we ended on under, so we're going to go over our 8th, under our 7th, over our 6th, under our 5th, over our 4th, and under our 3rd. And we want to make sure we do those 2 whole rows of that, just like we did with the pink, okay? And it may feel like you don't have enough room, but that's where you get to squish up your yarn and make everything nice and tight. Oh, my tail got stuck in there. Get out of there, tail. I suppose you could tape the tail down so as not to have this happen. This is the first time it actually has gotten stuck for me, so it hasn't been too bad. So push down your yarn, nice and tight. We're gonna go back. We're gonna go over the 3rd, under the 4th, over the 5th, under the 6th, over the 7th, and under the 8th. That all down, nice and tight, nice and tight. Okay. Okay, so now instead of going to the 3rd one, we can only go to the 4th one. So we're going to go over the 8th, under the 7th, over the 6th, under the 5th, and over the 4th. Oops, I unthreaded my needle. All right. Okay, so now we need to go back and we are over our 4th. So we now need to go under our 4th. So turn around. Under the 4th. Come on there. Over the 5th. Under the 6th. Over the 7th. And under the 8th. Now we're going back. We're going, we started on under, so we're going to go over the 8th, under the 7th, over the 5th, under the 6th. Oops, I'm sorry. Over the 8th, under the 7th, over the 6th, under the 5th, and over the 4th. Then we're going to make our turn. All right, this tail keeps getting stuck. All right, now we're going to make our turn and go back under the 4th. This is where it gets tight again, so just kind of move your pink out of the way, get under the 4th, over the 5th, under the 6th, over the 7th, and under the 8th. So I think you guys probably have I think you guys probably get it. So you just keep doing that all the way up 2 rows each time, just like we did with the pink. We're going to go all the way up until we hit our top gray band of weaving. And then I'll show you how to finish off the bookmark. Okay, I hope everybody's doing well on their white. There's one thing I wanted to show you real quick that's a little different than the pink is we never go down to that 1 wrap. We always have a line of 2, okay? So when you get to this point and you've done an over and under twice and you've gotten your 2 to meet here, your 2 rows of 2 here, then you're going to wrap it around and go back and do your long row. So there's never, on the white side, there's not a row where you just have the one wrap around like we did on this side. Okay, so I hope you guys can see that. See, it went down to 2, 2, 2, and then we go back up to the long row. Okay. So, there we go. Okay, now you're going to finish it all the way up, and then we'll finish it off. Okay, so you should have your bookmark to this point. You filled in all the white, and now we're going to finish off our bookmark. So we're going to flip over our loom, and we're going to cut our warp threads. Okay, and then we're going to take it off of our loom. Okay, now what you're going to do is you are going to take the excess threads, your old warp threads, and you are going to tie them 2 together into knots, and that's going to keep everything secure on the top and the bottom. So separate them out and grab 2 and tie them nice and tight. Push that knot right up tight to that line of weaving. There you go. Take your next 2 and make another knot, pushing it up real tight up against that weaving again. Okay. And your next 2. And nice and tight. And then your final 2, nice and tight. And then you're going to just repeat that on the top. And then we will get rid of these excess little strands here when we are finished with our tying. All right, so now that we have the ends tied off, see that and that, there we go. Now we're going to get rid of these little guys here. You need to weave them into the back of your bookmark, and this is how I did it because I made mine short, because otherwise they kept getting in the way if you make them too long. So what I did was I wove my thread, or my needle, excuse me, in and out of a couple of the stitches in the back. Then I threaded it with that little tail, and then pulled it through. And you have to be very gentle because the needle is large and you don't want to goof up your weaving. And then you can just kind of pull it through with your fingers. So kind of pull your weaving tight again, and then you can cut off the tail once it's woven in there. Okay, and you're going to do that with each one of these little strings that we had, or these loose little tails that we had at the end of our weaving. So again, I just go through a couple of the stitches in the back, weave it in and out. Okay. Then thread it. And then pull it through very gently. One detriment to these needles is the eye is huge, but then when you're trying to weave like this, it stretches it quite a bit. Pull it through. Okay. Fix your weaving there a bit. Pull it taut and cut it off. Okay. And you can give it some extra strength if you want. It is an option. You can Mod Podge your knitting as well, or your weaving, excuse me, your weaving as well. So you would just take Mod Podge and brush it on, let it dry, and it'll harden. And then that way these will for sure not come out. And it will also just make your bookmark a little more stiff if that's what you'd like. That is an option. I did not supply the Mod Podge, but if you have some lying around, you could do that. But otherwise, once you have all of your little tails, as I like to call them, woven through the back of your bookmark, you are set and your bookmark is complete. So I just have a couple more to weave through here. And I will be finished. It is at least a little forgiving. That's a plus when you're weaving these through. Last one here. All right, and there we go. There we have it, our woven bookmark. And you can always cut off the ends. You can leave them, or I like to keep them a little even, so I just cut off the uneven ends and made them a little shorter. But if you want a longer bookmark, you can leave it long. There we go. We have a nice little bookmark. Ta-da! All right, well, I know that was a bit of an intense one today, but I hope you guys had fun doing it. And I hope you join us next month for our next DIY Crafternoon. It is a Valentine themed one, of course, because it is February. It will be on the second Wednesday of the month. And the craft kits will be available on the first Wednesday of the month. Thank you guys for joining me today, and happy crafting.